So I'm so excited, as usual, that you guys are together and that you are participating in what we call life groups, where we do life together instead of alone. And I think you'd agree that it is always better this way, because there's so much that we have to work our way through every week, right? Not just the stuff from church that we're going to talk about in a minute, but the stuff that's just being a parent, being an employee, being a single person, being a student, being fill in the blank. To not have to do that by ourselves is something great. So I hope you'll take a couple minutes to appreciate that while you're together today. I want to review before we jump in for the topic at hand. We've been talking about the idea of becoming disillusioned and what are we supposed to do when life doesn't go according to plan, because most of the time it doesn't. And that's kind of step one, is accepting that fact, accepting reality that God's purposes and our plans are likely two different things. And so the quicker we can get to the place where we just accept that God is at work and our plan may not fit into that work, the better. And then second, we talked about not being cynical in that. It's so easy to fall into this place where we're just skeptical about everything and we assume the worst in everything. But we're committed to being real about how we feel, being real about our character and God's, and being real about the process that we all find ourselves in, no matter who we are or where we're at on this faith journey. And then just last, we talked about what it means to curate the chatterbox, or distinguish God's voice from all of the other voices in our head, telling us how we got here and what we need to do next. What does it look like for us to listen to God alone? Because ultimately it's His voice that can take chaos and put it into order. But most recently, we talked about the idea of not just being real about everything and not just accepting everything, but also deciding to be positive, choosing to look at what we're calling the steady horizon and what God has in store for us ahead. And it really comes down to that choice, doesn't it? Maybe better said, it comes down to perspective, because perspective not only changes how we look at things, but it changes what we look at, doesn't it? And think about it. If you've ever been to a third world country or a developing country, you've probably noticed or heard someone tell you about their trip when they encounter people who have next to nothing and are going through some of the most difficult circumstances that a human could be asked to endure. And somehow they're happy. Somehow they're joyful. Somehow they have a smile on their face. And it's not because they like what they're going through. It's not because they're some crazy, sadistic kind of person that wants pain and wants suffering. It's just they've decided to have a perspective unlike most other people's in the world. And they've decided what they're going to look at and how they're going to look at it. And really that's Job, right? Over and over again, Job kind of makes these 180 turns in his thinking about his circumstances. But we looked at this incredible moment in the story where God begins to speak. We haven't heard from God since chapter 2. And it's not until we get to the last few chapters where He begins to speak again. And it's interesting that in that dialogue, God asks Job about 67 questions. Two kinds of questions, right? Who is God and who is Job? And he kind of begins to compare God to Job. And ultimately, Job's kind of left with this decision of, who do I think is best in charge? God, who put all of the stars in place and makes sure that all of the animals are taken care of and thinks about things that I can't even begin to think about, or me? And ultimately, Job decides that it's God. And he chooses in that moment when he says, I take back everything I've said, given this perspective, God, which is what God does for Job, right? He kind of lifts him up to 30,000 feet and lets him see the bigger picture, that Job, you're not the only person on the planet. There's so much more going on here. So make sure you are thinking about and looking at the right things. And then Job goes, I take it all back. I see, God, that you're bigger. I see, God, that you're better. I see, God, that there's more at stake than just my life. But that's a decision. And then you see all over in the New Testament where we're encouraged to take joy in trials and be grateful when we face difficult circumstances, because it's God growing us. It's God taking us somewhere and changing us into the people that He wants us to be. So the thing that I've been challenging us all to do going forward when life does not go according to plan is to ask two simple questions. Who is God and who am I? And the more time we spend being real honest about the answers to those questions, I really believe that a sense of gratitude will well up inside of us. I really believe that we'll start to see things from a different perspective. It won't make everything go away. It won't make everything better, but it will change how we look at the plan that all fell apart and the parts that make it up. And you and I might begin to choose gratitude over anything else. I hope you have a great discussion and a great week. We'll see you next time.